Sometimes it feels like the sun will never rise, like the birds will never sing again. Believing a power greater than what you are going through. When you don't know what to do, keep breathing.
That's right. When you don't know what to do, just keep on breathing. From the City of Angels in Los Angeles, welcome to all my listeners out there in Radio Land. I'm Dave, the Caregiver's Caregiver, at caregiverdavecom, along with my lovely co-host, former mayor of a California beach town, and best-selling author of The Happiest Corruption, Sleaze, Lies, and Suicide in a California beach town, Debbie Peterson. So excited. This is her debut as my new co-host. Welcome to the show, Debbie. Also coming to you live and on demand 24/7 on numerous syndicated radio and podcast networks on 26 global audio and video platforms, including iHeartRadio, iTunes, YouTube, Spreaker, SoundCloud, Vimeo, Stitcher Radio, Blog Talk Radio, and there's just way too many to list right here. In fact, we're proud to be voted #1 caregiver podcast of the top 50 on Player FM and #2 podcast for caregivers on FeedSpot and #2 on caringvillage.com. And we have an especially exciting show planned for you today. Author of Successfully Navigating Your Parents' Senior Years, Aging Life Care Specialist, and CEO of Senior Living Strategies, Star Bradbury has helped thousands of families make educated and informed decisions as they navigate the world of senior living. And that is some rough waters to navigate. And senior healthcare, of course. And she has 25 years of experience in the industry and is founder of Senior Living Strategies and an aging life care expert. She specializes in developing resilient and flexible plans that promote independence and focuses on optimal quality of life for elders. But before we get started, I do want to take this moment to thank my last week's guest, Laura Linder, an eternal optimist and driven by her love to give. Her role as CEO is to continue to be her authentic self, to share her excitement with her team, to be grateful for, recognize, and reward the talent they have attracted, and to promote great talent from within. Her team is called Exclusively First Responders. Her promise is to set the standard for excellence with the highest quality care for team members, their clients, and their families to achieve optimal health and well-being. And just a reminder, you can watch or listen to that interview and all our interviews on our membership website, caregiverdave.com, or any of our other 26 global audio and video networks that I mentioned earlier, iHeartRadio, iTunes, and the like. All right, enough of that. Star, welcome to the show. So great to have you on the Caregiver Dave show.
I'm very excited to be here, and I want to thank you for inviting me because it's pretty impressive what you've accomplished and how many stations. I mean, that was a long, impressive list, and I'm happy to be included as one of your guests.
Well, thank you. And once a month, we also do a syndicated radio show that's heard on all 50 states and 135 countries on 75 channels, and that is a great show as well.
Well, I'd love to be on that too.
Maybe one day.
Maybe one day, that's right.
So, I always like to ask my guests just who is Star Bradbury and why was she placed on this earth?
Well, I have to confess that I listened to some of your podcasts, and I heard you were going to ask me that. But actually, I wrote down the very first thing that came to mind, and I can tell you I am a fellow human being on this journey in life, and doing what I think we're asked to do, and that is to find a deeper and greater purpose. So that's my metaphysical answer. In the practical world, I'm a wife, a mother, a grandmother, a sister, an aunt, and then I'm an author and a consultant and a presenter who has a commitment and passion to help people when they're dealing with the very confusing and challenging world of aging parents and senior living options. So I know that was a long answer, but there you go.
No, that wasn't a long answer. We all have this in common, that we all have parents who are aging.
Yes.
And some are not even around anymore. My parents have both left. My father died of alcoholism at 63.
Ooh, yeah.
I'm 69, so I'm doing better. I'm the new improved version of him.
Mm-hmm.
I don't drink and I don't, schlep around with other women. But he was a great father and a great human being, and everybody loved him. And I guess no one's perfect on this earth. And my mother had dementia in her final years, and she passed when she was 94. And so I'm familiar with the topic. And now her sister, my aunt, how old is she? She's 84. She's dealing with dementia as well. So my sister and I are helping her as caregivers. I deal with the medical stuff and the insurance, and she deals with the finances and all the money that's coming in and managing it and so on. And so
a lot on your plate still.
Yeah. Tell us about your parents briefly, Debbie. Are you part of this group too?
I am. And in fact, I share the too much alcohol situation. My dad died at 58
Oh, wow.
of a massive heart attack, and he drank too much and smoked a little. And yeah, that's a lesson for me. And like you, I drink very little. I never smoke. And,
me either. Never.
Yeah, yeah. And, it's interesting because I've observed over the years, and my mother died, I guess, about 9 years ago, and she was completely compos mentis when she went, which was a real gift. And it was her body that gave out, not her mind. And it's interesting, though, because as I look at this, you look at these patterns, we've all three said, no, we don't drink, we don't smoke. And the friends I have who exercise regularly, don't drink and don't smoke, are the ones who still have very fulfilling, full, active work lives. And I think there's a lot to be said for that.
Yeah.
Well, I definitely include that in my list of aging successfully. But you asked about my parents too. Well, my parents divorced and remarried, so I had two sets of parents, and they've all passed away. And so my 25 years in senior living is both a combination of my professional and my personal experience. And I like to say that I learned just as much, Dave, about what not to do by watching the choices that my own parents made as they became older and had major health issues and didn't have the support team that you really do need to age successfully. And then with 24 years in senior living, I met with thousands of families who were often thrown into a crisis where something happened and they realized that their parents needed more help, and they just didn't know where to turn. When I sat down to write the book, I was debating, should I write it for seniors, baby boomers, let's say, or anybody that falls into that category, or should I write it for the adult children? And I had a friend come to me and say, Star, we're the ones that need the help. By the time you're in your 70s or older, you've learned a lot, but we're thrown into this and we don't know anything. Please write the book oriented to help anybody with aging parents. But then what you just mentioned, I must have 15 friends whose parents are still with them in their 90s. Some are doing fabulously and some are not. And so that's the fastest growing demographic in the United States today is 90 to 100. So the book has a long arc, Dave, in terms of you could be in your 40s and trying to look at your aging parents, or maybe in your 70s and still have parents in their 90s.
Yeah, they call it the sandwich generation, but in my case, I'm the club sandwich generation because my wife I'm caring for, and then my mother, and now my aunt. And for those who have small children, it's the triple decker sandwich generation.
Well, yeah, that's why it's so stressful.
Yeah.
And that's motivated me tremendously, to help people, give them a guidebook to learn where to start.
And one of the exciting things that you're doing is if you're addressing those of us who are doing the caregiving, the baby boomers and some younger and some maybe a little older, you're now teaching us how to do it better for those who follow us. And I'd be really curious to know if there are things that we can put in place to avoid some of those crises that you mentioned a few moments ago.
Oh, absolutely, Debbie, because the book starts out with the first section is called Developing a Plan. And it's really encouraging people to sit down and have a conversation with their parents long before there's a crisis. In fact, I tell people the time to start these conversations is before your parents even retire. And I don't mean the heavy conversations. I mean sitting down and saying, Mom, Dad, or whoever falls into that role for you, or that you might find yourself helping. Could be somebody you've adopted. I call it family of choice and family of origin. But to sit down and say, what kind of a lifestyle are you thinking about? You know, when you retire, are you thinking about staying where you are, or maybe moving closer to me or another sibling or another family member? Those are soft questions that you can ask to begin the conversation.
Safe questions, yeah.
Safe questions, right? And eventually, hopefully, those conversations evolve into things like, do you have a living will? Have you thought about who should be your healthcare surrogate? Do you know what the statistics are for seniors needing long-term care? Have you thought about how you're going to pay for long-term care? Let's make a plan together. Let's get a conversation going.
Have you thought about when to stop driving?
Yes, well, that is a big issue, and it leads into a principle that I start out with that I think is a sort of a bedrock or framework that I want to create for people when they get my book, a step-by-step guide. And the principle is really, I like people to start with this question: how can I maximize my independence, prolong my independence for the longest possible time?
Yeah. That's my question.
And independence might mean different things to everybody, really. I like to sit down with people and say, what does independence mean to you? But that isn't the question people start with. Often they say, I'm just going to stay in my home. It's called aging in place. And my sort of soapbox is saying that you're going to age in place is nothing more than a statement, Debbie. It's not a plan. It just says, well, that's what it doesn't. So there's many layers to go through to be prepared for somebody to age in place successfully.
Obviously, one of the things we can do is grab your book. And so you've mentioned it a few times, but tell us the name of it again so that listeners can find it.
I can. It's right behind me, but behind you. Mm-hmm. Yes, successfully navigating your parents' senior years. And it says critical information to maximize their independence and make sure they get the care they need. And so often what I see with families, when there's sometimes, I'll call it a broken dynamic in terms of communication, is children are afraid, adult children. I know this from my own experience with my own parents, and then as I'm getting older and my own children, they're afraid to bring up these conversations. So they just don't. And although I don't think it's only the adult children's responsibility, I also think it's the aging parents' responsibility to say, let's sit down and talk about what's going to happen as I age. And I like to say, don't we all plan for retirement? And the answer, of course, is yes. It's like asking a question where you know the answer. But then nobody wants to plan for what I call post-retirement, which is after retirement. And in my book, I call it the go-go years. Right? You retire and you're on the go and you're traveling. And then there's the slow go years where things start to slow down. Maybe there's not a major health problem, but you're not maybe traveling as much. And then there can be the no-go years. And nobody wants to plan for that. We have this cultural mythology that our parents are never going to get old. I can't tell you the number of times that people say, but my dad was just golfing last week 5 times a week. But he was 85 and not so resilient, and something happened and things can change so quickly overnight. And my goal is to get people prepared. There's a long list in the book of critical financial documents, legal documents, medical information that you can get long before a crisis that would help you be prepared, especially if you're long distance. And how many people live near their parents anymore?
Right. And some of the most sensitive issues I've found is the role reversal. All of a sudden, I'm feeling like the parent and they're feeling like the child, and neither one of us likes that. And it's very uncomfortable, and it can be very abrasive. Any tips to navigate those rough waters?
Yes. And that is principle number 1. Let's go back to that. Because if you want to start a conversation where you're all on the same page and you're looking for agreement first in those murky waters of who's the parent, don't tell me what to do, I'm not going to move, I want to stay in my house, you shouldn't stay in your house, then it becomes divisive and you're on opposite sides of some discussion here. That's why I say stay focused on this question. Mom, Dad, I want to talk to you about maintaining your independence and maximizing your independence. Let's talk about what that means to you, because who is going to disagree with that? Yeah. I don't care how old your parent is. They can relate to that question. Now you've opened the door to a conversation where you're on the same side, because guess what? The adult children also want their parents to be as independent as possible for as long as possible. Now, starting that conversation and arriving at a solution is terribly individual. You know, there is no one solution fits all. But one of the questions you can start with is, how strong is your support system? How connected are you to your community or your family? Because the research shows, especially, and I know you both know this after COVID, that being lonely and isolated is a very strong indicator for failing to age successfully and failing to age in place. So yeah. I say, let's sit down and look at how strong somebody's support system is. And really, how available are the adult children? Like you just said, let's say you're working full-time, so is your partner, you've got young children in the house, you have aging parents. I really am supportive of the caregivers. Don't agree to a plan that isn't going to work for you. Just don't do it. If you know it's going to fail, don't invite your mom to come live with you. I mean, I loved my mom, but I could take her for about 3 days. Yeah, and by God's grace, I wasn't asked to really be a caregiver. Actually, my mom passed away first, and I brought my beloved stepfather up to 6 hours away to my town and to live near me, and helped with him for the last 6 years of his life.
And there's incorrect perceptions of the options that are out there. Like, for example, don't put me in a nursing home, because everyone thinks of Nurse Cratchit. But when I placed my mother into an assisted living place, and I did my homework, because there's good ones and there's bad ones.
Correct.
And, I wouldn't put my cat in the bad ones. But when you finally find a good one, I says, wow, this is a nice place. I wouldn't mind living here right now if I wasn't married, because they serve your meals, that you have your own little apartment, you're all downsized, there's no yard to clean, and you have this community and fun activities to do, singing at the piano or playing bingo or whatever. And it's your community. It's your La Boca Vista, to use a Seinfeld term.
Well, that is so important.
Go on, Debbie. I always think of it as the Grand Hotel. I was really lucky. My mother was one of these people who planned everything. I didn't have to do it for her. I just assisted and helped her. And so she knew when the time was right to do the things she needed to do. We helped her. And one of them was to go into assisted living. And she went into this wonderful facility. And it turned out that my mother-in-law also went into this same facility at different times, but they were so happy there because there were snack bars and there was a great room for dining where everyone could go dine, or you could dine in your room or cook in your room. You could have a guest bedroom so family could come stay. You could even have a little pet.
Most of them are pet friendly.
It was a blast. She had so much fun there. She died very happy. And when asked in her last days, what would be the trigger for you feeling life wasn't worth living anymore? This is when she was in hospice. And it was when I can't play bridge anymore. And because she just so loved hanging out with the other folks there and playing bridge with them.
Yeah.
Well, I think you're right, Dave and Debbie, because the majority of people don't really understand even what assisted living is and how it differs. They sort of lump assisted living and skilled nursing and everything into one thing, let alone a full service retirement community. Mm-hmm. For example, I just met with a client last week who's in his mid-80s, and he was a widower. His wife had died 7 years ago, lived on 20 acres in a lovely big home. But he realized, and at first he said, I'm going to stay in my home. And when we talked about the concept of what does staying independent mean, and we talked about the importance of being socially connected, he recognized that this wasn't serving him. This was not going to maximize his independence. And I helped him make a decision to move to what I call a full service retirement community, not even assisted living, because he didn't need assisted living. What he needed was supportive services. For example, he wasn't enjoying cooking and he wasn't eating well anymore. And then driving was becoming problematic. And so a full service retirement community would provide meals, transportation, lots of social activities, lovely dining rooms, even scheduled transportation. And that's just a retirement community. So the whole second section of my book is location, location, location.
How do you
what
find
the options might be?
How do you find, Star, a good place? Because it's hard. It's like looking for a needle in a haystack sometimes. It's not necessarily the place closest to you to be convenient for you. It's the place that's best for them, even if it's an hour drive away, and it's harder for you to get there. Yes?
Yes, I think that's true. And I think it's so easy to be bombarded if you start Googling retirement communities. But I think it depends on what you're looking for. Don't make the mistake of, I tell people, if an older person or a loved one is going to move, make sure they move to a community that has supportive services, not just a place where people golf and play tennis they're 55
grow
and
into, maybe
yes,
with a memory ward attached
correct.
to it.
And now, because there are full service retirement communities that also have on the same site assisted living or memory care. Now, if you add the skilled care component, that's what's called a life care community, or used to be called a CCRC. That's continuing care retirement community. And I worked in one of the top national life care communities in the United States for 18 years. And I am enamored of the concept because you move it in a perfect world, you move into independent living, but as your needs change, they're able to meet those needs either on a temporary basis after a setback or surgery, or long-term, meaning a true life care community has assisted living, skilled nursing, and memory care, all right there.
And
it's
hospice
usually
care?
part of a contract. Yes, almost any facility, even if it's a standalone assisted or standalone skilled, often have hospice contracts, and hospice can come in and provide end-of-life care or even palliative care. But I'm a big fan of helping people recognize that perhaps aging in place isn't their best option. Why? It may not be the right environmental space. Maybe downsizing to a smaller home, or moving closer to kids, or if they say, well, life care communities are out of my financial range, there are other options. Consider building a tiny house where your parents could live on your own property, but have their own space. So again, they're maintaining their independence. But things are going to change over time. You've got to be adaptable.
And people don't realize that if their spouse was a veteran, or they were, they will pay for assisted living.
Absolutely.
And they don't advertise that, do they?
Well, there's millions and millions of dollars worth of veterans benefits that are left unused every year. And I tell people, one of the questions I ask, were either of your parents in the service? And I'll tell you an interesting story. I had another friend whose mom and dad had been separated for like 15 years, but they never got formally divorced. And it turns out that because the dad was a veteran, that even though they hadn't lived together in many, many years, but they'd never formally divorced, her mom was eligible for $5,000 a month to help pay assisted living. And so I always tell people, do not make assumptions about several things. One is veterans benefits. Go and talk to a skilled veterans benefits person who's going to be able to help you. And the other is, don't make assumptions about Medicaid either. The rules change from state to state. Talk to someone who's knowledgeable, who can guide you as to whether or not you will qualify or eventually qualify. And those are important. Important to know.
We talk about red flags. When do we know that our parents, that it's time? Because we keep putting it off, in denial about it. But what is a really red flag? And we only have time for this last question. That would tell us that it's time to do something like now, or yesterday.
Well, hopefully you're not waiting for that crisis, which is why you should read my book, so you're a little more prepared and you're not waiting until mom walked out to the mailbox and fell and broke her hip. If you see any number of things, such as your mom or your dad used to be really neat, in their appearance, right? And also social. Now you see them wearing clothes that are a little dirty, or they're canceling a point. They're not going out with their friends to lunch, or you make a date with mom to have lunch and you show up and she goes, oh, is that today? Where you see they're starting to get forgetful. You see bills piling up, mails piling up. You see loose pills. The other thing is, and I'm going to hold one up, if you see Post-it notes, when people start to realize they're getting forgetful, I've noticed they'll put Post-it notes everywhere, constant reminders about their day and their daily lives. So those are more red flags for cognitive impairment. And you want to help somebody before there's a crisis, either because of cognitive impairment or because of their balance. You see them holding on to furniture as they're going from room to room, or they're less and less balance, more and more balance issues, less and less steady on their feet. And I want to tell people that, just having somebody come into the home 2-3 mornings a week and providing some support and assistance might help somebody maximize their independence and stay at home for another year or two before they have to move.
I joke around that I have a policy, a long-term care policy. One of the few people, who's smart enough to do it in their late 40s, early 50s. And so I tell my kids,
me too.
It can afford to put me in Malibu, and they joke and they say, "We'll put you in Pacoima because you won't even know that you're not in Malibu." But you hear about these cruise ships, with a 1-year cruise, which is cheaper than a facility. And I'm saying, well, maybe I should do that, And now what I'm doing for caregivers now is doing this Acapulco mastermind training and retreat for the caregivers. And this would be a good thing for seniors as well, because, they've got a retirement. They probably have some money. They could probably go on vacation all the time. What a nice way for a caregiver and their parents or their loved ones to take a great vacation in Acapulco, which is what I'm offering, and to get all of the training to make them a better caregiver. And if anybody wants to learn more about that, just go to acapulcodave.com. That's a shortcut to my Academy of Caregivers, and learn all about it and let me know. But
I think it's a great idea.
I think it's a resource for you as well in what you do.
I do. I think it's a great idea because it gives both the caregiver and the patient, let's say, the loved one that you're caring for, a chance to be together in an environment where they can both benefit, and some of that stress is gone because.
And who knows if that may be the last fun that they have together, because people just don't get away like they should.
No, they don't. And I see the caregivers getting more and more and more burned out. And when the focus is on the person who's ill, or the one that's their needs are being met, it's often the caregiver, as you all know, that's really stressed out and isn't even in tune with their own needs. I saw that with my own mom and my stepdad, who was a caregiver, and he just ignored so many health issues in order to take care of her. But I do want to invite people to go to my website because I have a lot of free resources, Dave. Yes, so people can go under, it's www.starbradbury.com. Under the resources tab, I have built, honestly, practically a library of free resources. Things like what to ask when you're touring a retirement community, what to ask when you're trying to vet a home care or home health care. How do you vet an assisted living or skilled nursing? What are the questions I should be asking to make sure that I get quality care for my loved one? And so I am helpful websites, lists of books that are helpful. So I encourage people to take advantage of that so that they can use those questions, help vet them, the right community for their loved one.
That's great. I can't believe how fast the time goes here.
I know.
Thank you so much for being on the show. Debbie, how can our listeners reach you if they want to get a hold of you? What you do?
Same thing. I have a website with a lot of resources for people who want to know how to navigate local government and make it work for them. And that can be very relevant for people with caregiver issues. And the website is DebbiePeterson.com, DebbiePeterson.com. And you'll find everything there.
Awesome. And remember, to our audience, all our live shows become recorded pod and video casts on all your favorite platforms. And my newly released book, Secrets from the Hammock, Uncommon Wisdom for Uncommon Times, is spreading wisdom all over the world. It's available wherever books are sold, and also on my free membership website, caregiverdave.com. And if you join my Caregiver Dave Facebook community of 34,000 caregivers, where you'll learn all about my new Caregiver Wellness Retreat and Mastermind in Acapulco that I offer to burned out caregivers, trying to keep as many of those 30% of them who die before their loved ones do alive. And if you click or follow the button on whatever platform you're watching or listening to this interview on, it helps us reach even more caregivers by improving Google's search engine algorithms. So thank you again, all my listeners out there all over the world, for tuning in every Wednesday and making us the #1 caregiver podcast on the internet. So until next week, same time, same channel. May God richly bless you all. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Hey everybody, it's Dave Nassani, otherwise known as Caregiver Dave, and I'm coming to you live from this beautiful Acapulco villa, which I like to say is the perfect prescription for caregiver burnout. And I have a unique opportunity to bring 14 burned out caregivers up here so that they can decompress and do all the things that they need to do. But this is just a bonus. It actually comes with the 6-month Zoom coaching program. It's a one-on-one consult with me, Caregiver Dave, to identify where you are and where you need to go. It's a 6 monthly small group coaching sessions to smash any obstacles between you and your ideal vision of what a caregiver needs to be and caregiver success. You get my 3 free books and instructions on boundaries, grief, self-care, organization, asking for help, learning how to say no, avoiding burnout, avoiding depression, avoiding perfectionism, avoiding isolation, avoiding resentment, delegation, team building, how to have fun, how to have no guilt, the importance of gratitude, and after caregiving, when you're no longer a caregiver. But this 7-day bonus is absolutely free. It comes with the coaching program that you pay for. And the food is all inclusive. I'm telling you, 7 days and 7 nights here is amazing. This is truly paradise. And I highly recommend it. For more information, go to caregiverdave.com. That's going to send you to my other website. And if you want a shortcut to get there immediately, just go to acapulcodave.com. Thanks again. I look forward to seeing you in Acapulco.
Sometimes it feels like the sun will never rise, like the birds will never sing.